You open your laptop to finally start the thing you've been putting off. You care about it. It matters to you. And within about 30 seconds, you're reorganizing a folder that didn't need reorganizing. That's strange, isn't it? You're not lazy, you're not indifferent, and yet somehow the task you actually care about is the one you keep avoiding. Here's the reframe. Procrastination isn't a failure of time management. It's an attempt at mood repair. In the moment you open that document, your brain isn't weighing deadlines. It's registering a negative feeling, dread, boredom, self-doubt, and doing the fastest thing available to make that feeling go away. Reorganizing the folder works. It's easy, it feels productive, and it makes the discomfort disappear immediately. The actual task doesn't stand a chance against that kind of instant relief. Roy Baumeister, who studied self-control and what he called ego depletion, found that resisting an impulse draws on a limited resource, one that gets harder to sustain the more you've already used it that day. Starting a hard task requires exactly this kind of resistance, pushing through an uncomfortable feeling instead of escaping it. If you've already spent that resource on other small decisions earlier in the day, the pull toward the easier, feel-good alternative becomes almost impossible to override. Not because you don't care about the outcome, but because the part of you responsible for tolerating discomfort is already running low. Walter Mischel, who ran the famous delayed gratification studies with children and a marshmallow, found something that gets left out of most retellings. The children who successfully waited for a better reward later weren't simply born with more willpower. They used specific strategies, looking away from the treat, thinking about something else entirely, mentally reframing the marshmallow as something less tempting, like a cloud instead of food. Willpower, in other words, wasn't a fixed trait some people had and others lacked. It was closer to a skill, built from specific techniques for managing attention and emotion in the moment temptation shows up. There's a well-documented bias behind this too, sometimes called temporal discounting. Broader research on how people weigh outcomes across time found that rewards and costs lose psychological weight the further away they sit in the future. A deadline 3 weeks out barely registers as real, while the discomfort of starting right now feels immediate and vivid. Your brain isn't miscalculating out of carelessness. It's applying a completely normal discount rate to anything that hasn't happened yet, which means the future version of you who has to deal with the rushed, stressful consequences barely factors into the decision at all. That future person is, in a very real sense, being treated like a stranger, someone else's problem to solve later. Think about what that means for procrastination. The task you're avoiding is, in a sense, the difficult marshmallow. Except instead of choosing between a small reward now and a bigger one later, you're choosing between relief now and a much bigger cost later. A rushed job, a stressed evening, a version of the work that doesn't reflect what you're capable of. Framed that way, procrastination isn't really about the future reward not being valuable enough. It's about the discomfort in the present moment being loud enough to drown it out. Think about how this shows up in an ordinary afternoon. You sit down to write a report, and within minutes, you're answering emails that could easily wait. You open a document for a difficult conversation you need to prepare for, and suddenly the kitchen needs cleaning. You know, rationally, that none of these substitute tasks matter as much as the one you're avoiding, but rational knowledge rarely wins against an immediate feeling, because the part of your brain generating the urge to escape isn't consulting your priorities. It's just trying to feel better right now. Modern technology makes this pattern far easier to act on than it used to be. A few decades ago, avoiding a task still meant finding something to avoid it with, and the options were limited. Now, an almost unlimited supply of quick, low-effort relief sits one tap away at all times. The discomfort barely has time to register before an escape route appears. This doesn't create the underlying urge to avoid, but it removes nearly every obstacle that used to stand between the urge and acting on it, which is part of why procrastination can feel more constant and more automatic now than it likely did in the past. Here's the counterintuitive part. It's rarely the task itself that feels aversive. It's a specific feeling the task threatens to bring up. For some people, it's the fear of discovering the work isn't good enough. For others, it's boredom, or the discomfort of simply not knowing how to start. Albert Bandura, who studied what he called self-efficacy, the belief in your own ability to handle a task, found that low confidence in a specific area doesn't just make people avoid failing at it. It makes people avoid starting it at all, because starting is the moment that confidence gets tested against reality. Avoiding the task quietly protects the belief that you could do it well, by never actually finding out. This explains something strange that a lot of people notice but rarely name: the fact that a deadline suddenly makes starting possible in a way that nothing else could. As a deadline closes in, the discomfort of not starting eventually grows larger than the discomfort of starting. At that point, the avoidance stops being the path of least resistance, and doing the work becomes it instead. The task didn't get easier. The emotional math simply flipped. Think about the specific moment procrastination usually kicks in, not at the start of the day in the abstract, but in the exact second you sit down and the task becomes concretely real. That's the moment the vague future obligation turns into an immediate feeling, and it's that feeling, not the task's actual difficulty, that your brain is reacting to. Notice how the substitute activities you reach for are rarely random. They tend to be things that feel like progress without requiring the specific kind of discomfort the real task carries. Organizing instead of writing, researching instead of deciding, planning instead of doing. At work, this substitution often disguises itself especially well. Answering a dozen small emails feels like real output, complete with a visible sense of accomplishment, a shrinking inbox, quick replies sent. Compare that to a single hard task that won't move for hours and offers no such feedback along the way. The email inbox rewards you constantly. The report rewards you only once, at the very end, if at all. Given a choice between frequent small hits of completion and one large, uncertain one, the brain's preference isn't surprising. It's just poorly matched to which task actually mattered more. This is not a character flaw, and it doesn't mean you don't care about the things you keep putting off. For many people, procrastination is simply the most efficient emotional escape route available in a given moment, one your brain has learned works reliably, which is exactly why it keeps getting used. None of this means the fix is trying harder or feeling guiltier, both of which tend to add more discomfort to the task, making avoidance even more appealing. What tends to work better is narrowing the target. Instead of starting the report, opening the document and writing one sentence. Instead of preparing for the hard conversation, writing down a single opening line. Small entry points lower the emotional cost of starting without requiring you to resolve the discomfort all at once. And once you're actually in motion, the resistance that felt so solid beforehand is often already smaller than it looked from the outside. So the next time you sit down to do something that matters to you, and you notice yourself reaching for something easier instead, pause on that exact moment. It's not proof that you don't care. It's proof that your brain found a faster way to feel better and mistook that for the better choice. And the next time it reaches for the easier thing, you get to ask what feeling it's actually trying to avoid.